Welcome to Sleepy Chronicles. Whatever today brought you, the noise, the rush, the things that didn't go the way you wanted, you can set all of that down now. Lie back. Put your headphones in. Let your shoulders drop and your jaw unclench. This is your time, and there is nowhere else you need to be. If you enjoy what we do here, quiet voices, slow history, and the kind of stories that make your eyelids feel heavier with each sentence, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It costs nothing and means quite a lot. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. We read every single one. Tonight we are going back, not to Egypt or Rome or any empire with a name. Further than that, 100,000 years before the first city, before the first written word, before anyone had thought to plant a seed and wait. Back to when your ancestors were fully human in every way that matters, and living in a world we can barely imagine. So get comfortable. We'll take it from here. There is a fire. It has been burning since before dark. Someone fed it through the afternoon, not randomly, but with knowledge. The kind that does not come from thinking. It comes from watching, from being shown, from doing it wrong once in the cold and never doing it wrong again. Around it there are people, not many, maybe 30. This is your whole world, not as a limitation, but as a fact so complete you have never thought to question it. You know every face here, every voice. You know who sleeps restlessly and who wakes before dawn. You know whose hands are steadiest when the work is hard. This is what your ancestors had instead of cities, instead of laws written on stone. They had each other, known deeply across a lifetime. The night is loud in a way modern ears have mostly forgotten. Insects, wind moving through grass. Somewhere in the distance, something large. The fire keeps the darkness at a respectful distance, and the people around it are quiet in the comfortable way of those who have nothing left to prove to one another today. This was not a simple life. That is the first thing to understand. Your ancestors alive 100,000 years ago were not primitive. Their brains were the same size as yours, same architecture, same capacity for memory, for language, for abstract thought. If you could reach back through time and bring a child forward, they would learn to read, to drive, to navigate a modern world without difficulty. The difference between them and us is not intelligence. It is only time, and everything time accumulated. What they had that we have mostly lost was a different kind of knowledge. They could read a landscape the way you read a face, instantly, with a depth that went far below the surface. They knew which direction the wind had shifted from the way a branch was bending. They knew from tracks in soft ground how long ago an animal had passed. They knew the night sky not as something beautiful, but as something useful, a map, a clock, a calendar built across generations of watching. That knowledge lived in people, not in books, in people. And it passed forward the only way it could, through presence. Through a child watching an adult's hands and copying slowly until the motion became their own. Some of it reached you, not the specific skills, but the structures underneath. The way your attention sharpens at the edge of a dark room. The particular comfort of a small group of people you trust, all in the same place. The way firelight still feels to almost everyone like safety. These are not preferences. They are 100,000 years old. Your nervous system was shaped in that world, and it has not fully left it. As the fire burns lower and the voices around it grow quieter, something settles. Not silence. The night is still full of sound, but a stillness that comes when the day is done and the group is safe, and there is nothing left to do but rest. Your ancestors rested like this, under stars so thick they looked like something you could touch. In the company of people they had known their entire lives, with the fire between them and the dark. The same stars are above you now, even if you cannot see them. The same body, cooling down after a long day, asking finally to be still. Let it. You are sitting across from someone who has not said a word in an hour, not because there is nothing to say, because what they are about to teach you cannot be said. In front of them, a stone. In their hand, another smaller, rounder, held with a particular looseness that looks almost careless, until you watch long enough to understand it is the opposite of careless. Every finger placement is exact. The angle of the wrist, the height of the strike. None of it arrived through explanation. All of it arrived through repetition, so deep it stopped being thought and became something else. They raise the smaller stone and bring it down. A flake falls away. Clean, curved on one side, flat on the other, with an edge so sharp it would open skin without effort. They do not look at it. They are already looking at the next strike. This is what your ancestors were doing 100,000 years ago, and for hundreds of thousands of years before that. shaping stone, not randomly, with intention so refined it took years to develop and a lifetime to perfect. The tool they were making, a hand axe, required removing dozens of flakes in a specific sequence. Take one flake in the wrong place, and the whole stone was wasted. There was no fixing it. You started over if you had another stone. If you did not, you went without. Archaeologists who study these tools spend years learning to make them. Professional researchers, people with graduate degrees and laboratory access, still cut themselves regularly, still ruin stones, still sit back and try to understand what they are missing. Your ancestor learned this as a child. Now it is your turn to try. The stone is heavier than you expected. The hammer stone feels wrong in your hand. You adjust again. Cannot find the grip that looks so natural across from you. You watch the angle. You try to copy it. You bring the stone down, and nothing happens the way it should. The flake that comes off is thick, uneven, useless. The edge it leaves behind is ragged. You try again. This is the part that does not make it into the version of prehistory we usually tell. The failure, the frustration of a body that has not yet learned what it is being asked to do. Your ancestor did not hand you a finished tool and walk away. They sat with you, showed you again, adjusted your grip with their hand over yours, not speaking, just repositioning. Here, like this, feel the difference. The knowledge lived in their hands. The only way to move it into yours was contact. Think about what you know how to do without thinking, not what you know how to explain, what your hands know. The particular motion of something you have done so many times, the conscious part of your brain stepped back and stopped supervising. Typing, driving a familiar road. The muscle memory of a repeated task, so embedded it runs on its own, while your mind goes somewhere else entirely. That is old, much older than you. The capacity for that kind of learning, for a skill to move from effortful repetition into the body itself, below the level of thought. That is one of the things that made your ancestors what they were. And it is still in you, unmodified, waiting to be used. The hands remember what the mind lets go of. Somewhere in your ancestry, someone sat exactly where you are sitting now, across from a teacher who taught without words, failing and trying again, and failing differently, which is its own kind of progress. Their hands were learning something that their children would inherit, not in their genes, but in their presence. Sitting close, watching, reaching out to try. And at some point, something shifted. The stone began to speak, in whatever way stone speaks to hands that have finally learned to listen. The angle became clear. The sequence made sense not as an idea, but as a physical fact, felt rather than understood. That moment, that particular crossing from not knowing into knowing with the body, is one of the most human things there is. You have felt it before. You will feel it again. For now, the lesson is done. The fire is lower. The hands that taught you today are resting, turned palm up in the dark. When did your hands last know something your mind had not yet caught up to? There is a cave on the southern coast of Africa where someone made a decision that changed everything. Not a practical decision, not where to hunt or when to move or how to store food through the dry season. Something stranger than that. Someone picked up a piece of red ochre, a mineral they had been using for practical purposes for generations, for tanning hides, for sun protection, for marking skin. And instead of using it for any of those things, they carved a pattern into it. Cross-hatched lines, careful diamonds, geometry that served no function except to exist. We found these pieces in a cave called Blombos in 2002. They are 100,000 years old, and the question they leave behind is not small. Why would someone do that? Not why in the practical sense. In the deeper sense, what is happening inside a mind that looks at a piece of rock and thinks, this should be more than it is. This should mean something. Every other species on this planet interacts with the physical world as it is. A crow uses a tool. A chimpanzee solves a problem. But no other animal has ever stopped to make a mark on something purely because the mark mattered, not to anyone in the room, not to anyone alive at that moment, but to some imagined future that had no guarantee of arriving. Your ancestors sat in that cave and made marks for no one present. Think about the specific difficulty of that. Not the physical difficulty. The ochre is soft. The lines are not complex. The conceptual difficulty. To carve a pattern that means something, you first have to believe that meaning is possible. That a mark can carry something invisible across time. That the gap between making and finding can be bridged by nothing more than the shared understanding that certain things matter. That is not obvious. That is not instinct. That is an idea. And 100,000 years ago, in a cave above a cold sea, someone had it for the first time. The ochre pieces at Blombos were not the only things found there. There were also small shells, nacreous shells, collected from a coastline several kilometers away, with holes worn through them deliberately, carefully, in a way that suggests they were strung together and worn on the body, not for warmth, not for protection, because they meant something about the person wearing them, because they said something to anyone who saw them without a single word being spoken. Beads, 100,000 years old. Your ancestors were not just surviving. They were already doing the thing that would eventually become art, religion, language, law, money, nations. All of it resting on the same foundation. The belief that the invisible is real. That a pattern on a rock or a shell on a string can carry something that has no weight and no smell and no physical existence whatsoever, and still be worth more than food. Ochre stayed with them across everything. They carried it when they moved small pieces ground smooth from handling, packed carefully among the few things worth keeping through a season of walking. Not because it had obvious practical value, because it had the other kind, the kind that is harder to name and far more human. When they buried their dead, they placed ochre with them, the same red, the same hands that carved those cave walls pressed it into the ground over someone lost. What marked the living marked the dead, and the meaning crossed the boundary between presence and absence and kept going into the dark. You are in a line that runs directly from that cave. The part of you that needs a mark to mean something, that keeps objects, because they hold weight no scale could measure. That saves a photograph, not for the image, but for what the image carries. That part is 100,000 years old. It did not begin with you. It began with a piece of red rock and a mind that already understood that meaning was possible before there was any proof that it was. The Atlatl is about 60 centimeters long, no thicker than 2 fingers, with a small hook carved into one end. It does not look like a weapon. It looks like a stick, but in the right hands, at the right moment, it turns a spear into something that can cross 30 meters in under a second and strike with enough force to bring down an animal 10 times the size of the person who threw it. The physics are real and precise. The Atlatl extends the lever arm of the throw, multiplying force in a way bare hands cannot. Your ancestors understood this not as physics, but as knowledge. Hold it here, brace like this, release at this exact point in the arc, and it works. They had been refining this for tens of thousands of years. The knowledge of how to make it, how to use it, how to carve the hook at the correct angle. All of it passed forward through the same method as everything else. Presence, demonstration. A younger hand guided by an older one until the motion became its own. This morning, 4 people left the camp before light, not randomly. The decision was made the night before in the quiet that follows a discussion that did not use many words. Someone had come back from the eastern ridge with information. The herd had shifted. The grazed grass near the dry riverbed told a story about direction and timing that the others read as clearly as you might read a map. A plan formed the way plans form in groups that have hunted together for years. Not announced, but understood. The 4 of them move through grass still cold and wet from the night. No talking. Sound carries in the early morning in ways that change everything. Communication happens in the body. A hand held flat and low means stop. A chin tilted left means look there. A slow open palm means hold, not yet. These signals were not invented this morning. They were inherited, refined across hundreds of hunts, tested against failure, adjusted. A vocabulary with no alphabet, legible only to people who learned it together over years of shared mornings, exactly like this one. The animal is closer than expected. Better because the distance is shorter. Worse because the margin for error is smaller. And because an animal this close reads the group the same way the group reads it. Its head comes up. Ears move. There are a few seconds before it decides. This is the moment that cannot be planned. One of the 4 shifts, not a decision exactly, more a reading of the geometry of the situation. A body responding to everything it knows about this specific configuration of wind and distance and animal behavior. The others feel the shift and respond, not thinking. The formation adjusts the way water adjusts to a new shape. The Atlatl is raised. The arm moves through the arc that 10,000 repetitions have carved into the body. The release happens at the exact point it needs to happen. The animal runs. For a moment, it seems like everything has failed. Then it slows. Then it stops. On the walk back, no one speaks much. There is a tiredness that goes deeper than the body, the particular exhaustion of sustained attention, of an hour spent with every sense extended to its limit. The four of them move through the grass with the quiet of people who have just shared something that did not need to be discussed to be understood. Shared difficulty leaves a residue. You have felt it. After something hard done alongside someone else, the specific closeness that requires no conversation, that sits between people like warmth without needing to be named. Your ancestors built entire lives around that residue. The trust that accumulates in people who have stood in difficult places together and did not fail each other was not a social nicety. It was as essential as fire, as carefully maintained, as deliberately passed forward. Someone from this morning's hunt will not be back at the fire when the others return. That is the other thing about the Atlatl, about every technology your ancestors built and refined across tens of thousands of years. It extended what was possible. It did not make the world safe. Nothing did. The world was never safe. It was only navigable for people who knew what they were doing together. They knew, and they went anyway. Someone is missing from the fire tonight. There is a space where they usually sat. Not a large space. The group shifts, closes the gap the way water closes around a stone, but you know where it is. Your eyes find it without being told to. The body keeps its own record of who belongs where, and it notices, quietly and without asking permission, when the record no longer matches the world. This is the part of prehistory that does not make it into most accounts. Not the tools, not the hunting, not the painted walls. The grief, the specific, ordinary weight of losing someone from a group small enough that everyone's absence is total. In a band of 30 people, one death is not a statistic. It changes the texture of every morning. It changes who sits where, who carries what, who wakes first and tends the fire. Your ancestors buried their dead. We know this because we have found them, bodies placed in the earth with a care that goes far beyond practical necessity. In caves in Israel, in sites across Africa, 100,000 years ago and earlier, archaeologists have uncovered remains that were not simply discarded or left where someone fell. They were laid down, positioned, sometimes covered with ochre, the same red mineral pressed into cave walls, the same pigment carried across seasons and landscapes as something worth keeping, sometimes surrounded by objects, a tool, a shell, something that had been theirs. The oldest known burial sites are not monuments. They are not elaborate. They are just a body placed with intention in the ground, intention is everything. The difference between leaving someone where they fell and carrying them somewhere and laying them down carefully is not a practical difference. It is a conceptual one. It means someone understood that this person deserved something more than disappearance. It means someone believed the dead were still, in some sense, owed something. We do not know what your ancestors believed happened after death. That knowledge is gone. But we know they did not simply walk away. We know they stopped. We know they did something with their hands, touched the ground, arranged what could be arranged, left something behind that said, "This person was here, and it mattered." And then they kept going. Because they had to. Because the season was turning, and the group needed to move, and grief, as real and as heavy as it was, could not stop time. There is something almost unbearable about that. The idea of picking up and walking away from a place where someone you knew was now in the ground, carrying the loss forward into the next camp and the next, waking up on mornings that looked exactly like the mornings before, except for the space in them that had not been there before and would not be filled. But they did it. Every generation did it. They buried who they lost, and they kept moving, and they carried the weight forward the same way they carried fire, carefully, deliberately, making sure it did not go out. The ochre placed in those graves is the same ochre pressed into cave walls, the same red, the same hands. What marked the living also marked the dead, and that continuity, that refusal to let the boundary between presence and absence be total, is one of the oldest human things we have ever found. Letting go is not the same as forgetting. Your ancestors knew this without having words for it. They left something in the ground, and they walked forward, and they did not forget. The person they lost traveled with them, changed in form, held differently, not in the earth anymore, but somewhere in the body, in the particular way a gesture is made, or a fire is tended, or a child is shown how to do something for the first time. That is how the dead stay. You are lying still right now, and somewhere behind you is everyone you have ever lost, and everyone they lost, going back further than memory reaches. A chain of people who carried their grief and kept moving, who stopped long enough to do something with their hands and then walked forward into the next day. You are the next day they walked into. Whatever you are carrying tonight, set it down gently. Not forever. Just for now. Just for the length of a breath, and then another. They kept going. So can you. good night.